You should be ashamed of yourself not standing up. You should be ashamed of yourself. Full of criminal aliens.
I don't agree with Democrats showing up to the State of the Union anymore because they know this is what Donald Trump is going to do. As a traditionalist, it hurts me to say that they should break tradition and not show up, but this is what happens. He traps them into these political moments that the Republicans can turn around and use and manipulate and propagandize for election purposes.
Hi, I'm Anushka Astana. This is Trump World. I'm in Washington, D.C., and I am drowning in news. But I have lost my life raft. Matt Fry is away on a project this week, so it is just me. Slightly bleary-eyed because I was up very late last night, of course, listening to the State of the Union address, the longest in American history. I sat down with my laptop at home. I brought down my 13-year-old son to watch it with me and my husband. I think I lost my son after about 15 minutes, my husband about half an hour later, but I promise you I watched to the very, very end. Donald Trump has had a massive dip in approval ratings, and that was what he was bringing to the State of the Union address.
After just 1 year, I can say with dignity and pride that we have achieved a transformation like no one has ever seen before, and a turnaround for the ages. It is indeed a turnaround for the ages.
There is lots to analyse. Don't worry, I'm not going to be analysing it alone. I am joined by a great political nerd. I hope she won't mind me saying that. Tara Set-Mayer. She is resident scholar at the University of Virginia, CEO of the Seneca Project, and a former long-time Republican comms director on Capitol Hill. I say former because she walked away from the party in 2020 because of Donald Trump. Now, the speech. Donald Trump has been in trouble. His approval ratings have been falling. Republicans are terrified about the November midterms. So he had to come and he had to make the economic case. And he did it in his normal Trumpian swaggering way. He said that this was the golden age of America. And he had a long list of things that he claimed he had done. Some of them were true. He said the murder rate had come down. It is true that the murder rate has come down, but most of his economic claims were at the very least exaggerated. We were trying to fact check as we went along. It is true that petrol prices have fallen, but not as much as he was suggesting. It is true that inflation is much lower than it was at a peak in 2022 when it crossed 9%. But it's also true that when he inherited the economy in January last year, inflation was already down to 3%. It's around 2.4% now. He also made claims about the amount of investment coming into America that were so wild, people had to try and work out where they came from. We think it's to do with chief executives saying how much investment might come in over the next decade. So he tried to make that case, and it was an incredibly partisan speech in which he attacked Democrats. There was one bit that I thought really summed up Trump. It was all about winning. Have a listen.
Our country is winning again. In fact, we're winning so much that we really don't know what to do about it. People are asking me, please, Mr. President, we're winning too much. We can't take it anymore. We're not used to winning in our country. Until you came along, we're just always losing, but now we're winning too much. And I say, no, you're going to win again. You're going to win big. You're going to win bigger than ever.
So look, I've sat through a lot of political speeches. I've analysed them, 20 years in Westminster, now here in the US. I thought this speech to some extent lacked a political narrative. There were times that I thought worked quite well when Donald Trump tried to, give medals out to war heroes in the room. I thought that, he tried to make the economic case, and no doubt, and I've been speaking actually to Americans who voted for him this week, no doubt some people will absolutely take that and think it is important. But ultimately, I'm not sure how much it really moved the dial. Let's bring in Tara to discuss all of this. Tara, you have got 30 years of political experience. You have watched a lot of State of the Union addresses. How did this one rank?
Well, admittedly, I have to say that every year that Donald Trump has given a State of the Union address, he has done something that has broken decorum or out of the norm, or frankly just turned the event into a spectacle where normally it's an opportunity to bring the country together and set an agenda. And I have to say that this one, given its length and its lack of real substance, frankly, it was more of a produced show almost than it was a traditional State of the Union. I would say that it was not one of the best.
And the length was quite something, wasn't it? I mean,
yes,
gosh, that's a record breaker.
Yes, I mean, even by the end of it, Donald Trump was hanging on for dear life because of he was clutching that podium pretty strong at the end of it. The attention span of the American people is very short. So when you give a speech that long, you have to think about who is your audience, who are you really talking to, and what is the purpose. And it becomes very clear that when Donald Trump gives these speeches, it is more about speaking to his base, and almost it feels as though he likes to hear the sound of his own voice. It turns into a campaign rally, frankly. A lot of these speeches in long form, the only difference is he may have stuck to the script a little bit longer than usual. He did go off script quite a bit, which is his signature. But it frankly, you have to ask yourself what was the purpose of this? And not, in my opinion, I've sat through 7 State of the Unions when I was a congressional communications director. In person, I've seen them. I've watched them over the years, countless States of the Union. And I have to say that it just did not rise to the occasion. I don't know why anyone ever thinks Donald Trump will.
And let's go through some of the things that he was maybe trying to achieve, whether he did achieve them in a minute. But one thing that was notable was Republicans stood and stood and stood again. There was a number of standing ovations. They were clapping. They felt very pro Donald Trump. This was your party, yeah? This was your party for decades. Mm-hmm. How did you feel to watch that response of it to Donald Trump? And what could it do to bring someone like you back?
The absolute sycophancy and obsequience to Donald Trump and his agenda over the last 10 years is partially the reason why I left the Republican Party and never looked back. The things that they have enabled under Donald Trump are so anathema to what traditional Republicanism was supposed to represent, in particular conservatism. It's frankly quite the opposite. And to watch the Republican Party clap and give standing ovations and reaffirm some of the awful things that Donald Trump has done, not only policy-wise, but just to the country and to the office of the presidency, and the threats to our democratic republic and our constitutional order, and to see Republicans who are so sanctimonious about adhering to the Constitution and would walk around with their pocket constitutions, preaching about the importance of adhering to those principles, sit there and continue to affirm Donald Trump the way that they did. It's just further evidence that the party is unrecognizable from the one that I was a part of for 27 years. They could never get me back.
Never.
Not in this iteration. Nope. No.
I want to ask you why you think they did that, but what was it that made you Republican? What is it that you would need to ever go back?
Well, Donald Trump and MAGA and Trumpism would need to be vanquished and thoroughly defeated before I would ever consider becoming part of a right-of-center political party ever again. I am currently an independent. The current Republican Party has strayed so far from the party of Reagan, that was the party that brought me in. The party of Ronald Reagan, the party of Lincoln, the party of George W. Bush, strong national defense, shining city on the hill, small government, individual freedom. though compassionate conservatism, those were the things that attracted me to the Republican Party. There was never a question about whether our democracy or our freedoms or the constitutional order was something that the president would violate. This current iteration of the Republican Party seems to not care about any of those things. It's all about the cult of personality and Donald Trump. And that is incongruent with my beliefs, not only as an American, but my beliefs as someone who actually respects the rule of law and understands what the founding fathers intended when they put this brilliant constitutional order together, that what Donald Trump is doing is an affront to all of those things. And it's shameful that the Republican Party has enabled it for so long and continues to.
And did you perhaps before this term consider Marco Rubio to be representative of the Republican Party that you knew and joined?
Yes, as a matter of fact, in 2016, I supported Marco Rubio for the nomination. I was at an event, coincidentally, in 2016 with Marco Rubio, Nikki Haley, and Tim Scott. It was the South Carolina primary. I remember it very vividly because I thought that they represented the future of the Republican Party. It was diverse, it was young, and I thought that, yes, this is the future. And that was quickly extinguished. And we saw the way all three of them sold their souls, in my opinion, to become acolytes of Donald Trump, despite the fact that they, frankly, know better. And that's the most disappointing part about it. Many of them know better, and yet they still went along for political power and relevance.
And Marco Rubio, now Secretary of State, was obviously there in front of Donald Trump. J.D. Vance, Vice President, was behind Donald Trump. Many see those two as possible future presidential candidates. I thought it was quite notable that Rubio got a standing ovation that felt really heartfelt, and he actually sort of sat down and was quite timid about it. J.D. Vance, maybe it was a bit more muted. I mean, what do you make of the both of them if they were to be candidates in the future?
Well, there is certainly a rivalry between J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio. They are jockeying for position in 2028. Normally, the vice president would be the heir apparent, and usually you would not have a primary if the vice president decided that they wanted to run. But this time around, that you're going to see a contested primary again. J.D. Vance is not a popular guy. He wasn't well liked when he was in the Senate. He's not particularly well liked now amongst his colleagues. They tolerate him because he's vice president of the United States. Marco Rubio is much more well respected. He has more experience, and I think that from a governing perspective, the allegiance to Donald Trump aside, but politically, Marco Rubio would be a stronger candidate on paper. However, with the MAGA movement and the base of the Republican Party, would they accept Marco Rubio given his past? Would they be suspicious of him, of being an traditional establishment Republican, and not support him? Those questions remain to be seen. But there's also questions about J.D. Vance. He's not very well liked. And he's more of a tech bro than a MAGA guy. So I'll be curious to see how that plays out in 2028. But there is definitely a rivalry going on there.
I felt what Donald Trump needed to do was to persuade the American people. You might be feeling the economic squeeze, but here's how I'm going to make your life easier. And there wasn't really much policy, as you say. There was an attempt to say, look, it was the Democrats who made prices go up. Now some of those prices are coming down. Let's be honest, lots of it exaggerated. We've tried to look up what he said on gas prices. It's not quite true. Mm-hmm. It's not quite true what he said on mortgage rates. Inflation was already coming down when he became president. Mm-hmm. Nevertheless, is that going to be something that will be persuasive for voters?
No. And the fact that Donald Trump has such difficulty telling the truth ever, I mean, he virtually lies out of every word out of his mouth. And I think people have become numb to it almost. And I think the challenge for him now at this point is that the people who voted for him were hoping that he wasn't all just talk. Well, what are you doing to make my life better? And he really hasn't prioritized making the American people's lives better. His own life is better. He has enriched himself and his family and his billionaire buddies and his international relationships and all of these things, putting his name on things and getting planes from the Qataris and making crypto deals, his family, doing these things, like all of these things, the $400 million ballroom, all of these things have not been prioritizing making the life better for the average American, which is what he promised and campaigned on. So many people, including independents, if you look at recent polling, his support is cratering among independents. It's cratering among Latino voters who helped put him into office this time. He's telling people all of these things, but the actions do not coincide. And just blaming Joe Biden and Democrats for all of the problems that the American people feel, or blaming them for the economy, is not only dishonest, it's just blatantly dishonest and wholly untrue. But it's also, I think, the American people are beginning to wear thin of these accusations where there is no basis for them, and it's not helping them get their lives any better when they see what Donald Trump's priorities are.
And speaking about the Democrats and about immigration, as you were, the moment of the night, which I guess he wanted this as part of his show, was where he was talking about Minnesota. He was attacking Somali Americans, as he does so often. And Ilhan Omar, representative from Minneapolis, started shouting back, saying, "You killed Americans." Americans, essentially, she was trying to stress American citizens, not the illegal aliens that he was talking about. And he responded basically saying, "You guys are crazy. You won't stand up when I'm saying stand up for Americans against illegal aliens."
You should be ashamed of yourself not standing up. You should be ashamed of yourself. That is why I'm also asking you to end deadly sanctuary cities that protect the criminals and enact serious penalties for public officials who block the removal of criminal aliens. In many cases, drug lords, murderers all over our country, they're blocking the removal of these people out of our country, and you should be ashamed of yourself.
What did you make of that moment of the speech? And does this help him in terms of the voter base, or can it be very damaging for him?
This is why I don't agree with Democrats showing up to the State of the Union anymore, because they know this is what Donald Trump is going to do. Sometimes, as a traditionalist, it hurts me to say that they should break tradition and not show up. But this is what happens. He traps them into these political moments that the Republicans can turn around and use and manipulate and propagandize for election purposes. We all know it's much more nuanced than just standing up and saying we support American citizens over illegal aliens. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the reason why Democrats would refuse to stand for that. Not only they weren't going to be used as political props in their minds, they were anyway, but it's also because Donald Trump is violating constitutional rights every single day by unleashing masked agents into the streets of America, terrorizing them under the guise of getting illegal aliens out of the country. That's not what's happening here, and they know it. So Ilhan Omar wasn't wrong. There were 2 Americans executed on the streets of America and on Donald Trump's watch. And several others have been killed or hurt or disappeared. And constitutional rights are being violated every single day. And our Constitution protects everyone, whether you are here documented or not. And they know that. But what Donald Trump does is he demagogues these issues, backs Democrats into a corner, and then you get a moment like that. So it takes a couple of layers of explanation to explain what that exchange was about and why Democrats didn't stand up. And that in politics, you can't have it. You need the quick soundbite. You need the quick explanation and keep it simple. And I think that's the challenge Democrats often have. And Donald Trump and the Republicans have been very good at backing them into a corner. So it was an unfortunate moment, but people are talking about it. And I guess if it brings up the context of why she shouted back, I mean, and good for her, she should have. I mean, it's very frustrating that he was able, though, to get the satisfaction of insulting her because, that's part of his shtick. And it's very unbecoming as a president.
On foreign policy, there's a quote in the speech that I just want to read to you. He says, "Our enemies are scared, our military and police are stacked, and America is respected again, perhaps like never before." Look, it is clear that people have their heads spinning around the world about Donald Trump, but it is also kind of true that they are scared about the relationship with America, and it's led to loads of foreign leaders to suck up to him. I mean, is he actually making gains on foreign policy because of that fear?
I think in the first term, he could say yes to some things, like getting more of NATO's cooperation and paying more money to NATO. Okay, fine. This time around, I think that you don't have as many adults in the room who are there to, particularly on the foreign policy front, explaining that we need to maintain our strategic alliances and the importance of those alliances, particularly with Europe. And in he continues to side with Russia and Putin. He's taking the wrong side here, and he seems more interested in ruling more with a hammer than the diplomacy and maintaining the relationships with our allies, whether it's the Five Eyes in our intelligence services, where, our allies don't feel they can trust us anymore, to what he was doing illegally in many opinions with Venezuela and the boat strikes. And then, of course, his threats with NATO and threatening to invade Greenland. I mean, these are all things that I think our allies are looking at the United States and saying they cannot trust us as a democratic partner anymore. And they're making plans. You see this all the time. They're making plans for what to do with the United States not being the leader of the free world. And that I think is something that should alarm everyone. But hopefully, once Donald Trump is out of office, we can restore those relationships because they are so critically important.
Tara, thank you so, so much.
My pleasure.
That was Tara Setmayer, and that is it for this week's Trump World. Do keep pressing follow or subscribe wherever you are watching or listening, and do please send us your comments and we will try to respond. See you next week.